not being able just to follow the playbook of the Premier League. They need to adapt their approach.
If you think about it, Cristiano Ronaldo or Messi or any football player, they cannot use their content. They cannot use those goals because of the media rights deals.
Fans can be creators themselves. They've got a unique view of the sport.
Sir Alex Ferguson, he used to say there's no player bigger than the club, but when you look at social media, that's not true.
The value of women's sport as a whole reaching around the $2.5 billion mark.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of Gameday. Today with a super special guest, the first woman we're interviewing in this season. You're the second woman that I have as a guest on my podcast, and the first woman this season. You made me realize that I need to do a better job on gender equality.
Yeah, I'm privileged.
Yeah. So Gabby, thank you for making the time and coming to talk to us today. I want to talk about what you're doing with Greenfly and especially how athletes can be empowered and how rights holders should leverage athletes when it comes to their content strategy and their marketing strategy and monetization strategy, because we've seen really, really good case studies. But before getting into that topic, please introduce yourself, tell the audience who you are, and how we met and why you're here.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. And I have to say this is strange because Kiki and I usually speak Spanish or Spanglish, so having to speak to you in English is like, okay, change the switch.
It's true that it's very strange because we always speak English when there's other people, but never when we're
so
talking.
now it's like, okay, we're in English mode now. But no, thank you for having me. Obviously nice to be able to be here with you, and we can work on that gender equality, don't worry.
I mean, that's an industry issue, I have to say.
No, it's true. But I'm privileged to be here. And in terms of who I am, why I'm here today, so obviously Gabby, I've had the pleasure of knowing Kike for quite a few years now. It's been some time. Obviously, we met during our time at Meta. We both worked in the sports partnerships team. I worked in the sports partnerships team here in London, managing relationships with leagues, federations, and teams. Prior to joining Meta, I was at Copper90, and then before that, I was at Google working in the ad sales and video strategy team. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. Right now, what I'm currently doing is working for Greenfly, and I've been there for 2 years now, which is crazy. It's gone super, super quick. I don't know where the time's gone, but my role as Director of Client Partnerships is to oversee the relationships with the organisations that we work with, whether that's the likes of DFL, CLGP, Premier League, a range of different organisations, and essentially help them get the most out of our technology. That's me in a nutshell.
It's incredible you said that when you said 2 years, because it's really it's been 2 years since we don't work together at Meta anymore, and time, when I think about it, time really has flown. But you had a really interesting career, very much into the sport industry. You worked for a digital publisher like Copper90, then moved into Meta to be on the platform side, on the social media tech company side, and then going into sport tech company. How do you feel sports, the media landscape has been changing in these few years? Because at the time when you were at Copper90, you were at the early days, let's say, of all this digital revolution. And I think Copper90 were probably one of the first digital publishers. And that has grown a lot, and you have the likes of 433 and others. How do you see the ecosystem now?
Yeah, I mean, it is fascinating, right? I think you touched on the fact that media landscape has evolved over time. Also, technology and the way that we consume media as fans has evolved. So naturally, organizations have had to adapt accordingly to be able to connect with fans in new ways. So, I mean, I think when you look at, even looking back at our time at Meta, the evolution of how fans were consuming content and how that shaped also new technologies and new features and functionalities across Meta. if we rewind back to 5-6 years ago, is very much around long form content and 3 minutes plus videos, and we're now in an environment where it's all about short form content and consumption and being able to engage with fans in a new way. Obviously, that's not to say that the other one, it's redundant, but it's around being able to adapt accordingly to be able to engage with fans in a way that reflects how people are consuming content nowadays. I would say even the introduction as well of new technologies and what we see across the board. Again, just touching on our time at Meta, I think when you look at how things evolved over time, the introduction of Reels, which I've already touched on from a short form content point of view, but the boom of the metaverse, right? And being able to publishers and organizations being able to identify ways to connect with fans through the metaverse. And then you look at Threads, and obviously we all know why that's also came around. And even obviously now the hot topic right now, it's leveraging the use of AI and how organizations, whether you're a club, whether you're a league, whether you're a content producer, how you leverage some of those technologies to either be more efficient, but equally being able to connect and engage with fans. So I think it's really interesting in that sense. Obviously, I think Mans there was probably quite like technology focused. I think at a wider, more macro level, we see how the shift to and the importance of athletes, which I know we've talked about in the past, and the role that they play in the ecosystem. I think over time that's become increasingly more important. And also even again from a fan point of view, that's the type of content that we want to watch and consume, and we want to get to know the stories and the ins and out of our favorite athletes. And I think when you look at the way how leagues and organizations are shifting towards that focus and really realizing the importance of elevating the athletes and these figures who have huge followings, who are super engaged and loyal, that's really important. So I think, yeah, obviously, over time, it's fascinating to see how things have evolved, both from a consumption point of view, technology point of view, and yeah, it'd be interesting to see where things are at, even, if we were to have these conversations in a few years' time.
Yeah, because if you think about the old model, rights holders and sport properties in general, they only had one conversation. Yeah. And that conversation was with basically broadcasters. They sign the deal, you get the distribution, you get the money, happy days. Yeah. That's it. You were transferring as a right holder, you were transferring somehow the relationship with your fan to a third party. Yeah. But with the disruption of social media in general and all these platforms, this transfer is not anymore the model. We need to create a lot of new ways of consuming content. And sometimes you see that and you hear people saying, no, because young generations are not following sport anymore. They lost interest. But I always make the same exercise. And I tell you, if I think when I was a kid, and I put together the watch hours, the concept that is very common for us, but not for many people, of watch hours. So the time you pass consuming sports content. When I was a kid, it was maybe one live game per weekend, so 90 minutes. I'm a big football fan, so 90 minutes of football on the weekends. Maybe you had like the news, 5 to 10 minutes of sports content that you were consuming every day. Yeah. And then you have on Mondays in Spain, there was a very good show that we used to follow called El Día Después, which is the day after, that they were doing a summary of everything that happened during the weekend. So we're talking about, 3 hours of sports content consumption in total. If I think about that today I'm consuming the content that I see from the athletes, the content that I see from the teams, the content that I see from the leagues, live games. I'm probably looking at 3 hours per day of sport content. And as new technology are developing, new ways of consumption are coming up, and it's going to be very interesting to see where the technology is gonna take us. You touched on AI. AI obviously plays a big role on on what you're doing today at Greenfly. But in this ecosystem where you see a lot of new things and new ideas and new technologies coming up, what do you think is the biggest challenge that the industry has today?
From a technology point of view, or just
from
in
technology in general, from a technology or business, I think how you match all this new consumption and all this fast evolving technology ecosystem to a business model that is very stuck in their own models still.
Yeah, I think there's probably a couple of angles there. I think first of all, in terms of again the challenges specifically for organizations, I think it's understanding your audience really well and being able to differentiate from others. I think we've talked about the fact, you've mentioned it, there's so much content being created out there. There's so many different platforms where you and I can watch content, whether it's highlights, short clips, whatever that is. And I'm not just talking on social, but also we've got, even entertainment, like from a streaming point of view, there's just so much out there. And I think that's where one of the challenges lies, is as an organization, what can I do and what do I need to do to be able to capture the attention of my fans? So you need to understand your fans really well, right? How can I speak to them in an authentic voice? So that's number one. And, that's not an easy task, right?
No.
Again, there's, kudos. There's a lot of organizations who do this really well, who create really cool, excellent, organic, authentic content that fans want to consume. And I think those will be the ones that win. Obviously, it's easier said than done. And I think from a technology point of view, or in terms of another challenge, is that being able to identify tools and resources that enable you to do and operate much more effectively and efficiently in a world where there's so much to do. Obviously, we've briefly talked around Greenfly, but it's even leveraging technologies like that to be able to make some of that process and workflows much easier for the business. So whether it's being able to capture real-time content and being able to distribute that at scale in an efficient manner, I think that's probably another challenge for organizations, is in a world where there is so much to do, how do you identify those solutions and workflows that will help you be more efficient? And by being more efficient, you can be more effective, right? Because it means that, okay, you can spend more time working through the strategy and making sure that you nail that. So I'd say, those are probably some of the challenges that come to mind. Obviously, that's not to say that the only ones, but yeah.
No, I think we're in a moment in a pivotal moment in this industry where the model is changing and everyone is trying to adapt. So I think that the biggest challenge the industry has in general is how you're going to adapt to all these changes that are happening all the time. And as new technology comes in, new challenges arise. But at the same time, we have big opportunities.
Yeah.
And I think the opportunities come from new business model that you can develop. So outside of the media rights, which has been traditionally the main monetization source for a big rights holder and sport organization, where do you think sports properties need to invest today to monetize their content more effectively in this new ecosystem?
You're asking the hard questions today, huh? Where do organizations need to invest today to ensure that they monetize content effectively? I think it varies. I think from and again, not to repeat myself, but I'll go back from a tooling and infrastructure point of view, is being able to invest in those resources that allow you to effectively set up an operation, which then you can monetize in different ways. So again, if it is from a content management point of view, it's being able to have the technology and the resources in place that enables you to package that content up effectively and being able to sell that to your sponsors, for example. But equally, not only to your sponsors, but we're talking about rights holding broadcasters as well, and being able to drive incremental value for your rights holding broadcasters because you have a new offering in place that is complementary to the 90 minutes that adds another angle and another lens when you're having, as a league, for example, when you're having conversations around media rights, etc. So I think that's probably one of the things. And then I would also go back to the athlete and the public figure. Obviously, there's some things around how these organizations monetize their talent. There's complexities around that as well, right? From a player contracting point of view, image rights, etc. But I think that's another angle as well. I think more and more you're seeing brands put their athletes front and center to what they do. Because, again, going back to what we talked around the role of athletes and the role that they play to helping elevate brands, leagues, whatever that is. So I think that's another challenge as well, of being able to effectively navigate that.
You talk a lot about tooling. Maybe we can take 1 second just to explain what is Greenfly, what you're doing with the sport organizations.
Yeah.
Because I really think that Greenfly, it's one of the essential tools that you need if you are a sport rights holder to activate effectively all your ecosystem. Because I think today it's not anymore about just communicating from your own channels. It's also about leveraging the whole ecosystem. So why don't you give us a big overview of what's Greenfly?
Yeah. So Greenfly enables organizations to better manage content effectively. What that means is we focus on 3 core pillars. So that is the creation and aggregation of content at scale in real time, organization of content through leveraging AI, and last but not least, the distribution of that content. So distribution of that content to the ecosystem. So whether it's distributing content to players, to clubs, to broadcasters, even back to owned and operated as well. And that's essentially what we do in a nutshell. Equally sponsors as well, I'll mention that. So helping organizations, supporting organizations in the monetization of the content as well. So really those are our 3 core pillars: creation, organization, distribution, and monetization. And that's very much at the front and center of what we do with the organizations that we work with. So I alluded to, we work with a variety of leagues across the world, and we support the content workflows. What I'll mention as well is very much, having that emphasis on that real-time piece, kind of like live or near live, which is of essence in the world that we operate in. And we know that, as fans, we want to consume content there and then, that it has to be timely and relevant. So that's something, again, that's very much front and center to what we do and how we work with a lot of organizations that have mobile content capture programs in place, for example, whether it's the likes of a DFL, I'll name them because they do a really great job of capturing content across every Bundesliga match and being able to distribute that at scale to the clubs, to broadcasters. So yeah, that's kind of what we do in a nutshell.
And what are the organizations, you mentioned the DFL, what are other organizations you're working with?
Yeah, we work with, again, from a leagues teams point of view, here in EMEA, we work with the likes of a CellGP, Six Nations, the Premier League. We also started to explore the brand world as well. Again, I think that's somewhere where we realize there's a lot of potential from a business point of view, just looking at a way, again, that brands activate their talent and the importance. From a global point of view, we work with some of the biggest names. So over in the US, the major leagues like NBA, MLB, NHL, etc. So we also, again, take pride on the organizations that we work with, and we spend a lot of time to understand what works well, what doesn't work well. And I think, again, something that is front and center for us is to be able to advise these organizations beyond here's the technology. We want to be seen as an extended arm of those teams and be strategic consultants to be able to, again, apply the learnings from the sports industry and help them drive overall business objectives around fan engagement, commercial growth, and whatever that may be.
because there's another challenge that I think we didn't mention before. With all this new technology, it's not only distributing the content to all the different platforms, it's also capturing the content from all the different sources.
Yeah.
Because 10 years ago or 15 years ago, the sport industry only needed to worry about the TV production. Today is the TV production, the reporters, the social media people, the athletes. How you capture all that content, no, and put a little bit of order to make it actionable. It's one of the biggest problem that I guess you're treating with sports rights holder at the moment.
Yeah. In terms of the content, the workflow.
Yeah, the workflow, because you have all these different sources.
Yeah.
And you could capture a very nice video from the behind the scene that stays on the phone of the social media manager that is capturing that video, the video maker that is capturing that video, but how you can share that to make sure that someone sees that video and say, okay, this is something we need to share, because maybe on the eyes of the social media manager, it's not something that you will share. That's also one thing that I always was telling when we were working at Meta with especially with football clubs or sports teams, that the social media manager of the club, of any club, it's very used to see all the things around him. He's used to go to the training ground. He's used to see the corridor, the trophies. And sometimes you don't really give the value that it really has for a fan to share that moment.
Yeah.
So I think enable that sharing, getting all the content into one place and allowing someone and allowing an organization or a team to say, okay, we're going to share this piece of content and this piece of content, like dividing that decision making of which content we're going to put out.
Yeah.
It's very important.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the other point, so a couple of things on that. I think the content producers or creators, they've got a responsibility to understand, okay, what works well based on us, fan following, what's the type of content that they want to consume, but also being mindful of where that content is going. To your point, maybe the content that is going to an athlete or to a club might be slightly different to the content that a broadcaster is receiving, for instance, and just being able to adapt based on that. And then I think the other point as well is knowing that and acknowledging that anyone can be a content creator. And when I say that is, you and I can be content creators. We've got our mobile phones. Yeah. Automatically, you can capture content. The same way that fans can be content creators. Again, part of the work that we do and being able to aggregate some of that content includes fan content. So fans can be creators themselves. They've got a unique view of the sport, and they're able also to put their own lens in from a passion and emotion point of view. So I think really anyone with a mobile phone can be a content creator. Obviously, you have some, across football clubs that have those specific roles and are more tailored. But equally, I think, again, anyone with access to a mobile device can be a content creator. And you can, we've seen even in my time at Greenfly, some really amazing pieces of content that have actually just been created by maybe someone in the comms team, for example, just because they were at the right place at the right time. And I think that's the other thing with content, right, is sometimes, you can have content that is reactive, more proactive, but equally you can have content that's a little bit more reactive that you can't necessarily plan for because it's just been at the right place at the right time and being able to capture that moment that just, encapsulates pure emotion and whatever that is, which is something, again, that we used to talk about when our time at Meta in terms of what makes great content. It's about it being emotive, entertaining, and you can't plan for those moments necessarily. It's around being at the right place at the right time and being able to capture that specifically. So that could be someone from, as I said, the comms team or someone else from the legal team even that just happens to capture a great piece of content.
Yeah, it's about sharing that authentic inside story. I'm going to make you a hard question now. You mentioned a lot of organizations that you're working with, some of the top leagues, clubs, and sport organizations in the world. Who's your favorite? Who's making the best use of Greenfly in terms of leveraging the platform and really using that distribution and enable athletes and broadcasters and partners to use their content?
Oh, again, hard one. And favorite. It's like, it's like a
No,
parent.
yeah.
Parents, you can't have favorites. So I have many favorites. But I can definitely call out some of the ones that do it really well. Again, I mentioned the DFL already. They've got a great program in place, Matchday Social, whereby they lean on the club social reporters to be able to capture that content and power that program, which again, I think from a resourcing point of view, it's a really clever way to go about it. You don't need to take on some of that burden from a resource point of view. They actually outsource that to the club reporters to be able to capture that content, which again is made available back to the clubs, but equally to the international broadcasters who don't necessarily have the resources to have folks every single week on the ground. So they do a really good job. Even, again, I'll talk about another European example and then I'll mention one from the US. I'd say someone like CellGP, for instance, they do a really good job at empowering their teams and the athletes. And again, CellGP is a league that's very much focused around remote content production as well. So that's where, again, some technologies like Greenfly come into place to be able to enable that effectively. And then, from a US point of view, obviously, you see some really cool stuff happening from the American leagues. If it is someone like the NBA, for instance, the way that they operate these programs, but equally the way that they make available this content back to the players, they do that really well, which is probably different and a contrast to what we see in European leagues, just because of the way that rights work. It's a little bit more complex for European leagues to be able to distribute content to the athletes from a rights restriction point of view, although that is changing. You're seeing more and more leagues relax that and give access to athletes because of all of the reasons that we talked about earlier. And I would say the US and the American leagues are probably in a different position where for them it's those restrictions are more relaxed and they can empower the athletes in a different way.
Yeah, because if we think about social media in general, people tend to follow more people than brands.
Yeah.
And that transfer to the sport, I think it's the best example of that. If you take all the sport organization in the world, I think except 2-3 exceptions like Real Madrid, FC Barcelona, and Manchester United, in all sport organizations you have at least one player that has more followers than the whole organization itself. If you take the NBA, LeBron James have more players than the league and all the teams.
Yeah.
So we are in a moment where everything has changed, and I like to quote here Sir Alex Ferguson a lot. He used to say, "There's no player bigger than the club," but when you look at social media, that's not true.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, it is unbelievable, and I think we're seeing that more and more. It's more prominent, it's more in front of us. And I'd say, again, I want to talk about women's sports as well. But even when you look at that landscape itself, you're seeing more and more of those figures come to the limelight and to the forefront to be able to elevate
the whole sport.
The sport. I mean, I know obviously we've heard this time and time again, but you look at some of the things that, Caitlin Clark alone in the WNBA has been able to do, and not just Caitlin, but other high-profile figures
there are
have
many
been able
examples.
to do.
Serena Williams.
That have been able, those figures and what they've been able to do to elevate their respective sports is so important for organizations to double down on that and see the potential and what these athletes can do. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, now that you touch on women's sport, I think the biggest mistake that the women's sport movement is making And I think, I don't know if it's by default or by the people that are managing the organizations, but the biggest mistake is that they're following exactly the same playbook as the men's game. You know, the Premier League, it took the Premier League years, 20, 30 years to build the value they created today. If now the Women's Super League wants to do the same, they need to play a different game.
Yeah.
If they play by the same playbook of putting the content on TV and try to make media rights revenue and everything, I think they're not going to get there ever. But if you leverage the athletes and what you were mentioning, you find a fast lane to reach that this same level of value. I mean, it's a good debate, but I don't know what's your view in general on women's sports and how the executives are treating the business and especially marketing the product.
Yeah. I mean, I think, again, it's a tricky one. I think when you look at organizations like the WSL, for instance, I mean, I do think they're doing a great job. You know, it's really exciting what they've been able to do just in a year alone. I think they officially set up as a independent entity last season, and what they've been able to do in a year alone is pretty amazing. Yeah. Both from a broadcasting point of view, they signed the deal with Sky. Again, record-breaking figures, and even from a title sponsorship point of view with Barclays as well. That in a year alone is really amazing, and again, will hopefully give. It's helping set up that foundation for the growth of the women's game. Again, if you look at figures as a whole, revenue figures are increasing across WSL teams. Live viewership is also increasing, which is amazing to see. I do agree with some of the comments that you made around organizations needing to take a different approach to the men's, just because of, you know, again, you can't compare like for like. It's completely different where the women's game is at. But I do think a lot, or some at least, organizations do realize and see that the need to adapt their approach and not being able just to follow the playbook of the Premier League or another men's league. And I do think you start to see the way that they approach things differently, and probably you see more and more and more. I think there's some really cool examples out there as well from organizations that are trying to be a little bit different to appeal to a wider fan base, whether it's even from a female fan base, and how they do partnerships with brands to being able to go after that fan base. You see a lot of the clubs as well being able to identify, okay, who are going to be the right commercial partners that will be with us as part of this growth and trajectory. And again, I'll go back to the point of like for like. I think obviously women's game, completely different stage. I think when you look at the opportunities, obviously we need that investment from sponsors and commercial brands. And yes, right now from a returns point of view, again, it can't be compared to the men's just because of where viewership and where the audiences lie. But I think as well it's important for sponsors and potential partners to be able to identify and have that long-term vision to see, okay, well, this is where the women's game is at. Where will it be in 2-3 years' time? And how can I be part of that journey? I think that's probably a challenge that a lot of, whether you're a league or whether you're a club, a challenge that you have to being able to identify the right partners that will be part of that journey with you and can, reap the rewards in a long term as well.
Yeah, I think you need patient capital first, because you cannot change things from one day to the other. And the second thing you need is to really leverage the players, because we've seen that with the women's NBA. Yeah. You have one star, and that brings all the traction to the sport and elevate. So the way you structure your media deals and your broadcast deals has to be completely different, more close to what you were mentioning before, the US model where athletes are able to use a lot of the content and not so much the European model. Because if you think about it, Cristiano Ronaldo, even though he made hundreds of goals, or Messi or any football players, they cannot use their content. They cannot use those goals because of the media rights deal. So on the women's game, if we want to really reach that audience and we really want to grow, we need to leverage the athletes and use them as a distribution platform to reach the audience, because that's where the growth is going to come from, and that's what will accelerate the growth.
Yeah, and I think as well, so I know, and again, sorry to reference the same example, but I know from a WSL point of view, as of this season, they've relaxed the rights from a player's point of view, and the players have access to content, clips that they can distribute. It's a win-win situation for everyone involved. It's a win-win for the league, it's a win-win for the club, but equally for the players themselves to be able to elevate the brands. And I think something that's been really nice to see is, I do think in the women's game, particularly here in England, you've got some really great figures that we can follow and see the stories, and they've got a really strong presence as well on social, and I think we need more of that as well to be able to, inspire young fans and follow someone's journey, which a lot of these stories that they're really inspiring. I think as well the difference with the women's game is that the access to talent and those players is way different than what it is with the men's. And again, I'm stating the obvious here, but I think generally when you see, the way that these female players, whether you're a football player, whether you play basketball, volleyball, whatever that is, they're a lot more relaxed or free when it comes to those opportunities and having a voice across the platforms, whereas for the men's side of things is very, very different. So I think capitalizing on that is really important.
Yeah, and I think that comes from the fact that if you think about all the professional women's athletes that you have today, they grew up without imagining a world where they will make their living out of sport, because professional sports for women didn't exist. So now they're driven by that passion. So that passion is what made them get where they are.
Yeah.
And they've been pushing the whole movement. Whether a boy that started playing football and he was good at football 20 years ago, he knew that he could make his living out of his passion. Yeah. And I think that main difference, it's what makes the access and
for sure.
and the effort that the women's put into the game completely different.
Yeah, and I think there's also, and again, I'll reference them. I was at a talk last week, and Alessia Russo was part of the panel. Obviously, a huge figure in women's football, amazing player. And there was a really good question from the audience. I said, do you feel there's a sense of there's too much pressure and based on, you're a female player, you should have this voice and this is how you should show up? And Alessia's answer was amazing, and she referenced the fact of, for her, she feels there is a sense of responsibility, but she does it from a passion point of view, right? Being able to inspire these young girls, and equally when she was younger herself, there were certain athletes that she looked up to, and there's a responsibility from her point of view to be able to give that back to young girls, even and boys as well, watching the women's game, which I think it's amazing, and obviously it's a cycle, isn't it?
Yeah, and also it's opening up the opportunity to enjoy the game. I think sports has this unique power of getting people together at one point, at one certain moment in time, in one place, and there's nothing better than the energy that you feel on a stadium. And being able to have that shared experience with thousands of people in the same place, and that energy that you feel on the stadium, it's not comparable. You can enjoy a game on TV, obviously, or in the metaverse, or in whatever other use of technology, but nothing is going to never substitute the feeling of being at the
for
stadium. And by having a new league that have more events, it's also giving access to more people to enjoy that experience. Because if you think about the Premier League, unless you are a season holder ticket of Chelsea or Tottenham, it's very hard in London to consume Premier League content live.
Yeah, for sure. And I think as well, it's as you say, it's about opening those opportunities. And I know we've been very much focused around football specifically, but even again, talking of other sports like cricket. I'll talk about cricket. I'm also involved, which I didn't mention at the beginning, but involved with Warwickshire Cricket County. I'm on the board and looking at what we're trying to do with our women's team. And, even last year, our women's team became professional. And again, I think that's probably another sport that is probably a little bit further behind than what women's football is. But that's where we want to get to. And it's not just cricket. It could also be basketball and whatever that is. And it's just around elevating the entire ecosystem, not just football itself, but other sports as well, to being able to open the doors for those new fans and being able to tell the stories across that world. I think it'll be really exciting to see where things are at in 2-3 years' time. I was reading a report, I think Mackenzie mentioned that, the value of women's sport as a whole reaching around the $2.5 billion mark, which is, the gigantic numbers. And I think that's just today what those figures will look like, and the revenue and the commercial opportunity will be in 2-3 years' time, but will be really amazing and significant. And I think the other thing that I mentioned as well is that we're seeing, which is quite topical, is at the moment, just off the back of the Red Roses winning the Women's World Cup and doing such an amazing job, and us, from a sports point of view, leaning on those key tentpole moments to help supercharge the growth. We saw it with women's football back in the Euros a few years ago, and more recently, now hopefully with rugby, the Red Roses doing an amazing job and winning the Women's World Cup. There's a Women's Cricket World Cup taking place next year. So I think that's also, for me as a fan anyways, it's really exciting to see I guess the aftermath and the effects of these major tentpole moments and what they can do to help supercharge the women's game. So yeah.
One of the biggest challenges I think the women's game have today is that when I look at football, when I look at rugby, when we are at a national team level, you are able to get a lot of traction. So around the Euros, around the World Cup, around all these tentpole moments. But then it's hard to transfer that to the day-to-day of the clubs. So it's what you were saying, how we breach that problem, no?
Yeah, and I think, it's not easy, is it? I think there's responsibilities on the leagues, but equally the clubs to capitalize on those moments. And it's not to have these moments as a standalone and say, okay, well, what happens next is now the opportunity for, let's say if we're talking about rugby, you've got Women's Premiership Rugby. There's a big opportunity for the league, but equally for the clubs themselves to say, okay, we had, our athletes had an amazing tournament. How can we elevate? What can we do to help elevate? Again, their profile, and not just help elevate the profile. It's more leveraging the voice of the athlete. But equally from a commercial standpoint, again, it's been able to identify those partners that they want to be part of the journey, and that you've been able to unlock new audiences, which then, again, can therefore you're able to monetize those new audiences. So again, I think there's an onus and responsibility on the leagues to be able to do that. But equally, again, I talked, from an athlete point of view, that's one thing, but also it's been able to, us as fans, we have a responsibility as well, is to make sure that we're showing up to those games, make sure that Because it's all great and well, okay, we can watch the content online, which is amazing, and we get to follow our favorite players and the stories. But hey, as fans, I do think there's a level of responsibility. Let's get out there. Let's go to the stadiums. Let's support our teams. Let's watch, let's watch the coverage on live TV as well. I think there's a responsibility for us to get out there and, back the teams in that way as well.
Yeah, I think that will follow if the product is marketed the right way, if we use the athletes to elevate the product, to distribute the content. That's a flywheel, a virtuous cycle, a flywheel effect that will kick in and will make the women's game grow for sure.
Yeah.
That all comes connected. One question to end this conversation, which has been amazing. Which team do you support? I never asked you that.
Oh God, this is hard because I get a lot of stick for this, and I feel like now this is going public, whether I should change my answer. So I would say, I'm a relatively neutral when it comes. I'll give you a few different answers. When it comes to national football, obviously, I have two teams that are close to my heart. Obviously, naturally, I've been living in England for quite a few years. So, England team, both the Lionesses and the men's team for sure. I got to be at Wembley when the Lionesses won the Euros a few years ago, which was unbelievable. Spain as well. I've been half Spanish. I've got a lot of passion for the team, and both men's and women's team are doing an unbelievable job. When it comes to club football, I'm a little bit more relaxed. I think the Arsenal women's team are doing a great job at the moment. So yeah, I'll leave it there. There's probably a couple of other teams and certain players that I have some interest in, but
so you love the game.
I love the game. Yeah. I get so much stick for having multiple teams within the Premier League. But yeah, I've learned to just stick to the one apparently. So yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Gabby, for making the time.
Thank you for having me.
Hopefully we'll repeat this conversation in some time in the future.
Yeah,
because the ecosystem is evolving so fast that we'll need to repeat this for sure. And we'll love to see where we are with the women's game that you are so passionate about.
Yeah,
thank you so
thank
much.
you for having me. Thank you.